I've also ordered my boxes of donuts and encourage you all to do the same. Now that's it for me, at least on my things. We're gonna talk about Krissy though. Krissy DeAlejandro is the president and CEO of Tennessee Achieves. It's a scholarship and mentoring program that supports students as they transition from high school through post-secondary. It was launched in 2008 and it currently serves as a partner organization for Tennessee Promise, while also building and executing summer bridge programs, completion grants, proactive coaching, and Knoxville Promise. Since inception, Tennessee Achieves has worked with over 560,000 students and boasts college retention and graduation rates above both state and national averages. The program is also responsible for annually recruiting and training more than 8,000 volunteer mentors. Those mentors work with the students as the majority are the first in their families to attend college. That's exciting. So prior to working at Tennessee Achieves, Krissy served as Deputy Chief of Staff to Knoxville County Mayor, where she focused on workforce development and higher education. She's a native of McMinnville, Tennessee, and Krissy was the first in her family to attend college and believes that higher education changes lives and transforms communities. She and her husband Jeffrey have 3 children, Oliver, Beatrice, and Henry. Without further ado.
Actually McMinnville, if you're a local, not McMinnville. So my name's Krissy DeAlejandro, as Kim said. It's always beautiful to hear your bio, but I was the first person in my family to go to college, and that is a story that has been interwoven into the story that you will hear about Tennessee Achieves. To give you just a brief history, I was born to a 16-year-old mom who dropped out of high school and married my 18-year-old dad. And I was an only child growing up in a small rural community where higher education wasn't necessarily the norm. And while I feel incredibly fortunate to have had the opportunities to go to college, it was a long, rocky, windy journey where my parents and I often found ourselves scratching our heads, being truly intimidated and terrified of the college going process. I often say we did it together. We sort of grew up together trying to make this work. I grew up at low income. My house was 638 square feet. I only know because I looked it up years later. It was small. And so thinking about that journey for me of going from Warren County High School to the University of the South at Sewanee undergrad, I made so many missteps along the way. We didn't file financial aid. In fact, we didn't know it existed. I graduated with a class of about 450 of my peers, and I think 16 of us went to college directly following high school. To say that my journey to post-secondary was a statistical abnormality is really a euphemism. There was really no chance of me going, but I went and I loved it, and I continued to land in a PhD program here at the University of Tennessee, where the journey of Tennessee Achieves really began. So as a doctoral student, I was studying local government. In fact, I thought I wanted to be a lobbyist, which just sounded really cool to me, having really no idea what that meant. So I thought, I'll get my doctorate, I'll become a lobbyist, and I will go and lobby on behalf of local governments. It just sounded like, I mean, that's the nerdiest thing you've ever heard. That sounds so cool. But I didn't know what local government was all about, so I stumbled in to the Knox County Mayor's office and said, hey, I'm studying local government, but I actually have no idea how it works. Can I actually sit here and observe? Mike Ragsdale hired me to run his reelection campaign. I then, which I think the qualification was that you would work for very little pay, and work long hours, and somehow I did the bill at 23. But from there, we started a program, or talking about a program called Knox Achieves on my whiteboard. The idea was for really kids like me, kids who no one in their family had gone to college before, kids who thought that there was really no opportunity out of high school or something different from what they had known. For kids who felt intimidated by the college going process, and the easiest thing to do was just to ignore the college going process. And to be honest with you, kids who shared with me during this journey, especially that first year of asking a lot of questions of students, that they could never afford to go. So I'm going to fast forward really quickly through the story so we can really talk about the program. But Mayor Ragsdale was neighbors years prior with a gentleman named Randy Boyd. And so Randy Boyd stepped into my life 16 years ago. We pitched this idea of what's called a last dollar scholarship. The idea was that students would file federal and state financial aid packages. We would then provide private funding to cover what the student or family would otherwise owe in tuition and fees. We would ensure that students would complete at least 8 hours of community service. The idea was to cultivate a culture of giving back with these students. And then most importantly, drawing from my story, we would pair the student with a volunteer mentor, someone in the community that could help and walk alongside that student, to be that someone in the corner that 17-year-old Krissy really wishes that she had back in 1997 when I was making the decision to go to post-secondary. So we pitched that idea to Randy. This is, everyone knows him here, but he literally left the office. He came back 30 minutes later, my phone rang and he said, hey, I've raised $2.3 million. Let's go do this. I'm sorry, what? Who is this man? So anyway, 16 years later, he's Randy Boyd, and that's how things work for us. But I think what's really important is to let you know it's homegrown. Started here, we stayed here for 3 years. One of our original board members got an important job in Nashville, so when Mayor Haslam became Governor Haslam, our mission started spreading, and now the first state in the country to be able to say to every high school senior that not only is college your destiny, that we will fund the opportunity for you to earn a college credential. 15 years we celebrated just this last year, and you can see the numbers are incredibly impactful. Nearly 600,000 students have gone through our program. Randy and I were flying somewhere the second year, and he said out loud, don't you think it would be really cool if we sent 10,000 students to college? You can see there, 302,000 students have gone to college since we launched our program, 134,000 using the Tennessee Promise. So oftentimes I get that question, what's the difference? So Tennessee Achieves, where Baylor, who's on my team, and I wake up every day and are privileged to work, is a 501c3 nonprofit. So we wake up in partnership with the state. The state now has the Tennessee Promise, so we no longer are raising dollars privately for the scholarship. It's excess lottery dollars that have been placed into an endowment. So we can say to a kindergartner, Tennessee Promise can also be part of your journey. The majority of our students are landing at our state's community college, Mississippi State, mentioned earlier. The majority of students coming out of Knox County do land at Mississippi State. In fact, it's the #1 leading institution in Knox County for high school graduates who go directly into post-secondary. So we're still doing the things that we did when we started. We have a very solid foundation of last dollar scholarship, being the Tennessee Promise, community service. I'm going to talk to you a bit about our mentorship program. We also do a lot of other things. We have a value at Tennessee Achieves of try a lot of things and keep what works. We're very entrepreneurial in spirit. So over the years, there's been sort of the magical equation in my head of what are students telling us that they need, and what is the data showing us that we have to do? So over the years, we've developed things like summer programs. We've developed intrusive proactive coaching. So our most economically disadvantaged students have a very small chance of both landing in college, but if they go, their chances of making it to a college degree are actually slim to none. You insert the coach, and I'm going to show you the data in a bit, it actually jumps 105% the likelihood of success. The heart of our program is our mentoring program. It's probably the piece of the puzzle, the Tennessee Achieves puzzle that we're best known for. We ask volunteers across our state to step up and be that someone in the student's corner. If no one in your family went to college, it can be daunting and terrifying. And to be honest with you, our students very rarely need to know the mechanics of going to college. There are a lot of people in their lives that talk about the mechanics of the next step. No one's there to really encourage, to normalize, to say, I always tell students, everybody first fails their first math test, right? Like, it's normal. That doesn't mean you walk away from college altogether. But I've heard story after story of college not being normalized for our students, and the first failed test or the first roadblock. We've all heard the story of a student who has a flat tire, can't afford to pay for flat tire, and they walk away from post-secondary altogether. These are the kinds of things that we're trying to address. What the mentor does in these situations is not fix the flat tire, but encourage the student to continue on. Encourage the student to say, this is normal. What's important is that you continue and find a path forward. They also help us navigate with the students. There are 49 individuals on the Tennessee Achieves team, and we serve about 90,000 students every year between our high school seniors and our college students. 60,000 of those are high school seniors. So if you're off to Vanderbilt, you're applying for Tennessee Promise, but for that student who really has no idea, which I would argue is about 30% of the students we serve, that mentor makes all the difference in the world. We train our mentors. We actually try to make this the easiest lift that we possibly can in the volunteer space. 1 hour a month to be that someone in the corner. It's 1 hour a month to answer questions. Students like to text. That's where we hear the most success. We do gather our mentors and students together at the high school of the students. The mentors select that high school, and what we have found is that interaction really matters. During COVID, we tried to do online mentoring, and you guys, it was just miserable. And so we're back in the high schools. Mentors are back with our students in person. That happens in December. And then we are there throughout that high school senior year, working with students to get them to post-secondary. You have a push card if you are interested in being a mentor. There's a QR code on that push card that can take you directly to our application. Deadline is October 20th. And we still need 256 in Knox County alone, about 4,000 statewide between now and the deadline. So I encourage you to participate. You can see here the majority of our mentors come from business every year. It's incredibly important to us that I just said to my good friend Frank Rothermel, we want to expose our students to busy people. That's really important to us, to have busy people in our students' lives and heighten the exposure of what exists if you do earn a college credential. I had no idea that you could be a nonprofit executive when I was going to college. And so really ensuring that students understand the depth and breadth of the workforce is incredibly important to us. So I will close with please mentor, but we're going to talk about the rest of the program. Community service being a big part of what we do. Our students have given back nearly 5 million hours of community service since inception. Randy, who continues as our board chair, says this is the largest community service organization in the state. I don't actually know if that's true, but I like being first, so we lean into that. While we do work with students to get them into mostly community and technical colleges, because that's the Tennessee Promise arm of this work, what is funded, We also operate the UT Promise, which is a scholarship for underserved, economically disadvantaged students to attend the University of Tennessee, the systems. All of those schools, tuition and fee free. The idea is to boost our workforce by having a more educated student. And so for us, it's about not getting the student to remain eligible for promise. It's about inserting the mentor into the space so that students go to and earn a meaningful college credential. As I said, we do have a relatively large team now. So what the mentor really does is they get them to college, and the idea is there is a handoff to a coach, a professional coach at Tennessee Achieves, who's working with our students to get them through the pipeline. So the reason we really started the coaching is that every year we were recruiting a great number of mentors, and our mentors were doing a great job. In fact, the first year of Tennessee Promise, we saw a 5 percentage point increase in our state's college going rate. That was more than the 7 years prior combined. It was a huge influx of students. But what we knew on the flip side is that some of our colleges had really abysmal completion rates. In fact, one of the colleges in Memphis had a 4% completion rate when we launched Tennessee Promise. And so the thought of providing funding and a mentor to get the student there, and then understanding, especially for our lowest income students, their likelihood of success was so small. We knew we had to do something. So we've inserted our proactive coaching here. You can see for our first year retention with these students, economically disadvantaged students, it was 40%. 40% of low income students starting in the fall of their freshman year and returning the second fall. You insert a coach and that jumps to 75% first year retention. You can also see the giant increase in the 3-year graduation rate. No one's excited at Tennessee Achieves, just so you know, about 34% in 3 years, but it's significant from when we started, and the coaches continue to make a significant impact. Knox Promise was really where we started this work. The Haslam Family Foundation came to me one day and said, if you could build your dream program, what would that look like? And what Knox Promise does, and we've taken this now statewide, is not only do they have a coach that is inserted into their space once they land in college, but they also have access to emergency grant funding. So keep in mind, Tennessee Promise only funding tuition and fees. And so students need to buy books. They need a computer. I can't tell you during COVID how many students that we talked to who were writing papers on their phone. I mean, I can barely get a text message out that's more than a sentence. So the thought of writing an entire paper and doing well, it's not possible. So we're buying computers now for students. We're also making sure that students are able to get themselves to school, transportation being a significant barrier to a student earning a college degree. We're also feeding a lot of students. I read some of our completion grants last year. Students write a bit of a narrative telling us the need. And one student said that she wouldn't be able to have Thanksgiving had it not been for the funding that we provided to address the food insecurity, because she had a household full of addicts. So for us, what we know is that it matters in the student life, but it actually also moves the needle. So you see here that 40% I talked about, you insert that completion grant and the coach, and the first year retention rate jumps to 82%. And that's for community college students. Now, I read in the paper yesterday that Chancellor Plowman was celebrating a 91% retention rate at UT. This is pretty dang close. We also do a transfer pilot. So one thing that sort of keeps me up at night is that we're bringing students into the community and technical college pipeline. But what 67% of them tell us is that they actually have aspirations to transfer, but only 24% actually make the leap for the same reasons that they're not going. They're afraid, they're intimidated, all the things that we know. We've also inserted the coach here to try to eliminate some of those roadblocks along the way. And what we're seeing is beginning at 24%, in only 2 years, 46% of the cohort have transferred. We're making significant progress, not only getting the students into the 2-year schools, but also into the 4-year programs. This is the emergency grant funding. I don't like calling it emergency grant funding to students, so we call it complete grants. And you can see here now the state is funding that initiative statewide, $1.8 million given out annually. I will tell you that we launched our second year 2 weeks ago, and within 3 hours, we had $777,000 requested in emergency grant funding. It was like anything we'd ever seen before, but amazing, amazing, I think sad, and the fact that there's this much need, but also that we are able to address it. You can see here where the majority of the grant funding is going, really in that gas and transportation and food categories that we talked about before. The green represents Tennessee Achieves. I'm not going to go through all of our data, but we are constantly evaluating. We are raising dollars privately to operate, so it's important to me that we give the story to donors that we're moving the needle. So not only are we outpacing the state data, but national data as well. So COVID happened, we were doing really well, and then COVID happened and there's a national crisis. Students are no longer going to post-secondary, and in fact, there is a lot of swirl across the country around whether or not there's value in a post-secondary credential. I hear all the time, well, not every student needs to go to college. Which student doesn't need to go to college is my question, right? Because we're putting a big tent around the word college. We're saying technical college is college. That's the TCAT, the Tennessee College of Applied Technology. Community colleges have a breadth of programs, certificates. Yesterday, I was meeting with the president from the state, Krissy, talking about their expansion in the allied health fields. And all the programs he was talking about outside of nursing are one-year certificates that get students into high demand fields. Something after high school matters, and it's something that we desperately need to be talking about in Knox County. You can see here how we're doing in Knox County. We're tracking everything by county. Students in Knox County outpacing the state. We have a lot of support in Knox County. We've been here 16 years, but as I said, still a lot of work to be done. In January, we gathered to announce an initiative called 70 by 24. So in Knox County at the moment, our college going rate is 64%. So 64% of students leaving high school going to any type of post-secondary directly following high school graduation. So we set a goal of 70%. We want 70% of our students pursuing something. This means 501 more high school seniors this year need to be attending college. We cannot do this alone. We have to have everyone bought into this idea and pulling in the same direction that post-secondary matters. We do have a QR code if anybody's interested in learning more about the 70 by 24 initiative. My good friend Matt Ryerson is in the back and is a huge supporter of our work. But really all you're committing to is saying that college matters and giving an opportunity to every student, regardless of background or zip code, really matters and moves the needle in our community. I always like to end with one of our students. This is Brandon. Brandon is a TCAT student in Nashville. You can see here he's pursuing HVAC. And again, so I think we've got to break a lot of stigma that college means four-year institution, and we've got to really think about what speaks to our students. Brandon's life is going to be forever changed by Tennessee Promise because Brandon, very economically disadvantaged, single parent household, going to college, earning his credential. These are my kids. This is Beatrice, Oliver, and Henry. They're slightly older now, but there's significance to this picture, and I want to share with you. So over the years, Anthony Wise and I have become good friends. For those of you who don't know, Anthony earned his master's degree at Wake Forest. And when Oliver, who's my oldest, almost 14 now, in the middle, was growing up, he talks about going to college all of the time, right? He was going to college, Wake Forest specifically. And so I was just thrilled. I never talked about going to college when I was growing up. In fact, it was never even sort of thought of as an option. in my household. But Oliver not only was going to college, he was going to Wake Forest. Now, I told you that I went to Sewanee. My husband went to Louisiana Tech. We literally had 0 ties to Wake Forest. I should say that at the time, Oliver was going through a phase where he thought he was part bear, part tiger. It's important for this story. And so finally one day he was sharing with the person as we were checking out of the grocery store. He said, I'm going to Wake Forest when I grow up. And the person was like, oh, that's so great. I'm pretty sure she had no idea what that meant. And so we get to the car and I said, son, I love that you are so excited about college, but why Wake Forest? And he said, college in a forest. So my point of telling you that is that the cycle has forever been broken in my family. I never thought college was an option. And so not only was it life-changing for me, but it's life-changing for my 3 kids who are already predestined to go to college. Mentoring really matters, and I understand we're all incredibly busy, and you think like, I can't take on one more thing, and I'm not here to guilt you into that one more thing, but I do know that our goal of 70 by 24 will not be reached by the 49 people that work at Tennessee Issues. It has to be a community-led effort. It has to be all of us saying that this really matters, college matters, and that you, student, matter, and I'm going to help you along the way. So I do hope that you'll grab a push card and consider joining us as we work to get the class of 24 to and through post-secondary. I am happy to take questions. Do we have time? No. Yes? No, no questions. Sorry. Stay behind for questions. Thank you so much for your time.